Hey everybody, welcome to Office Hours with Dylan Hutchison, where we highlight the great people of the channel. I'm joined by none other than Eric Anthony. How are you?
I'm good. I don't know if I would consider myself great though.
Oh
So,
no, we do. Everybody that's watching this or everybody that knows you, I've heard nothing but great things, and it's been nothing but a pleasure to know you.
well, I started back in this what we want to call the channel, the ecosystem, whatever we're calling it now. All the way back in like the dark ages, 1992ish, and I just have never felt like I feel in this group of people in this environment. So, I'm doing what I can to give back. That's
Yeah,
kind of the role that I aspire to at this point.
I absolutely love it. And, we've talked about it in Discord and other groups like that, where you can't call yourself a champion or a subject matter expert. But, on behalf of, the channel community, I've heard nothing except for Eric is a true MSP and channel champion. So just what you do to give back to the community, the people that you highlight and the things that you do. And we'll dive into all of that fun stuff later on. But just want to say it's been exceptional to follow along and learn from you and everything that you put out. So with that said, for on the rare chance that people don't know you, give us a little intro of yourself, a little story, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, sure. My name is Eric Anthony, and I am the founder of All Things MSP. I also work during the day at Ignite as part of their channel program. And I have worked in this industry, like I was talking about, since 92 officially. Before that, I was actually doing some consulting before I could actually drive. So my mom would have to drive me to appointments. But I've always been interested in tech, number one. Number two, as I've learned more about tech and more about business, I've really become interested in the processes and the experience that both partners feel, that their clients feel, and that vendors feel, because vendors do feel as well, contrary to popular belief.
We do have feelings. Yep.
Yes. So
um,
that's me in
yeah.
a nutshell.
So I do want to highlight, some of your previous experiences, not only in the MSP channel. So, you actually feel the pain of the end client. You had some time that you served as a CIO. Do you think that changed the way that you see the channel or the managed service community, or maybe changed your approach to partnering?
Yeah, absolutely. Because sometimes I call it, I've been on all three sides of the fence, right? Because I've been on the provider side, I've been on the vendor side, I've also been on the client side
Hmm.
as a CIO. And we're not talking about a virtual CIO. I was the CIO of a small group of manufacturing companies and at a winery in there just for good measure, because that's what the owner had. And so I've been the receiver of the services of an MSP as well. So yes, I've kind of had that experience on all different sides so that I can kind of speak to all three sides as well.
Absolutely. So you've got a really unique experience or maybe an approach to how you work with MSPs or how you work with varying vendors of saying like, hey, this is how what you're doing impacts me as the end client. Have you had vendors come to you that maybe you've advised on, hey, you've got a really great process for the MSP, but that doesn't translate well to the end client?
Oh, for sure. But we've had it in both ways, right? And a lot of it has to do with traditionally a vendor who has sold direct has understood the end user use cases and needs and problems, and they have to translate that to the partner, which can be hard because now you've got this third party inside the relationship, and so there's a whole process for doing that. There's also vendor partners who have been only working with channel distributors, whatever, and they don't understand the end client's problems and thoughts and concerns and all of that. So it's kind of doing both. It's making sure that you have the perspective to see what the needs of your customer, the MSP partner, and then also the end user. You know, what is all of that, because again, we kind of go back to that word ecosystem, right? And it's just not just a channel partnership, but it's an ecosystem where
Mhm.
we all feed off of each other now. It's not as unidirectional from vendor to partner to end user like it used to be. So it's an interesting dynamic, and it's been fun to work with different vendors and different MSPs in the space to kind of clarify that and build a process to make sure that that feedback is not just going down, but also coming back up as well.
Yeah, the total circle feedback loop is crucially important because as vendors that are selling to the channel ultimately through the end client, a lot of times we don't have that closed loop communication with the end client. Like, hey, what do you like about my product service solution that I'm not getting from the MSP? Because a lot of
Right.
times they've got a different use case than the MSP does, or maybe in co-managed IT solutions and services. We don't get that feedback. So with that said, talking about process, you've been very, very involved in the channel for quite some time, specifically in the strategy and enablement side. In your opinion, what is the most crucial piece of a partner onboarding journey? And then let's take it a step further with the customer onboarding journey.
So the number one thing with onboarding is expectations. And you hear me talk about this quite a bit on the podcast and some other things, where onboarding is that place where you are setting up, whether it's partner or end user, you're setting up the initial expectations and you're delivering the first deliverables of that relationship. So it's highly critical to deliver what you promise you will, number one, but also to set the expectations so that they know how to expect the relationship to continue after the onboarding process. Now, there's a bunch of technical pieces to the onboarding process, right? And that's going to be different for every MSP, for every vendor, based on what type of service, what type of deliverable, what type of product they're selling. But beyond that, it is really where the rubber meets the road in terms of experience. I talk about partner experience, I talk about customer experience a lot, but this is where you finally have a contract, you've signed them on the dotted line, but now you actually have to start delivering. Are you delivering well? And that's, to me, the most important thing in onboarding is making sure you get it right, because that is, for a lot of the organization that you're servicing, those are the first impressions.
Yeah, I completely agree. And we talk about it all the time on the vendor side, where going to your MSPs, going to your partners with a plan of success, to kind of put a compliance spin on it. You give them the plan of action and milestones for implementing your product, your solution to their customers, implementing it in with their technology stack. You're right. It does change vendor by vendor, or solution by solution. But I want to hear you, go through what are some pieces that you think vendors miss in partner onboarding? Maybe not setting expectations properly, or missing timelines. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So, a lot of times, what they're missing is the non technical, non product related enablement for the partner. Okay. So it's the sales and marketing piece, which some vendors do very well. This is not something where I can say a lot of vendors have this problem,
Hmm.
because a lot of them have been getting better at it and a lot of them are really good at it. But it is probably the worst thing that you can miss when you're creating an onboarding program for MSP partners, because they're not sales savvy most of the time. They're not marketing savvy most of the time. And so they need those non technical aspects of how to deliver your product or service to the end client. Okay. And if they can't convert them in the first place by marketing to them and then selling to them, you're never going to get them to the technical piece. Now, there's also a technical piece that sometimes gets missed because we focus so much on features, we don't focus so much on support.
Hmm.
And support is one of the biggest things, and it's one of the biggest expectations too, because different vendors have different expectations as to whether the MSP supports the product, the vendor supports the product. Does the vendor support the product directly with the end user or only through the MSP? How does that work? Making sure that MSP partners know how to work with you in the support side of things, because you know as well as I do, Dylan, bad experiences in support can cause any customer to churn. And so if you don't understand how that product or service is supposed to be supported, then it's hard for the MSP to deliver on that support well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we talk about it all the time. Poor communication kills partnerships, it churns customers. Want to go back to the sales and marketing side because, again, like you, it's something that we see not necessarily vendors miss, but maybe lacking in that regard. We talk about all the time. Our job as vendors is not just to help them sell more of XYZ product solutions to help them become a better business. There's no better way to make your partners a better business than help them sign net new customers for full managed services. Can you talk about maybe some tools or resources that you think vendors do a great job at highlighting? Maybe it's email templates, helping them with webinars in a box, those kind of resources. Can you talk about some of your favorites that you've seen?
So I think all of those resources are great. I think the important key part is to pull them all together into some type of partner portal. A
Mhm.
partner relationship manager will work. I've used Magentrix in the past, but there are lots of other ones out there that you can use. You know, webinar in a box, email templates, like you said, ebooks, uh, video content. Like, I think that there's room for generic video content to be done by a vendor without faces on the screen. Maybe you use cartoon characters or something so that it can be reused by your partners, right? All of that stuff is good. Putting it in one place and giving them instructions on how to use it in that place
Mhm.
actually more valuable than the content itself. Because if you give them the content with no instructions, it's probably not going to yield good results.
Yeah, and that ties into really just the importance of how in depth you go with your partner onboarding, really understanding their customers. How have they acquired customers in the past, or maybe where do they want to transition their acquisition in the future? And then also just understanding how active are you on social media. All of us here that are probably watching this are overly active on social media. That's how we find our customers and find our new partners. But just going through and helping them through, hey, here's what's available to you. How are you going to use this? How do you plan on using this? How can I support you in using these resources? It's one thing to drive them to your partner portal. um, Transparently, I've done a bad job of that in the past, like, hey, all the resources are on their partner portal, but I didn't show them how to actually use the partner portal, walk them through with the guidance of here's how I use this on a day-to-day. And that was some key misses that I've had in the past. And once I made that mindset shift of, hey, I'm actually going to educate you on why this is important. Oh my gosh, I mean, our partners were using the partner portal like crazy.
Well, it goes back to the old Simon Sinek, start with why, right? And you can have a PRM, but again, if you're not enabling partners to use it, is it doing you any good? No,
Right.
it's not. And so, yes, there is a certain amount of that enablement that needs to happen on how they should use your tools. So that's part of it. And you mentioned something that I think is key, because this is something that I think a lot of vendors they miss out on, and it doesn't just happen during onboarding or enablement, and that is strategy. Actually giving the partner a plan to follow, and then following that up with accountability. That's what a good, in my opinion, account manager during onboarding should be doing. There's going to be other people teaching them things, right?
Hmm.
But it's the job of the account manager to make sure that they are being onboarded well and have a strategy for the onboarding. And then that strategy picks up again. Now we're starting to work opportunities with that partner. Each one of those opportunities needs a strategy plan, because again, MSPs not always the best salespeople, but if you can give them a strategy and a plan and you're reviewing those opportunities with them, have a much higher chance of success in closing those opportunities.
That is such great feedback. And I talk to a lot of vendors that are new to the channel, not just the MSP channel, whether you're talking about, VARs, MSSPs, regardless of your channel, they have the expectation, hey, I'm going to sign on this partner and they're just going to broadcast this everywhere. That's not reality. You have to teach them the why behind your product solution and what you're selling. Because if you don't, they're going to guess. More than likely, they're going to get it wrong. And then it goes on the back burner because you're not top of mind with them. They haven't seen that short-term success. And then ultimately, you see the partnership fall flat on its face. What could have been a beautiful, great long-term partnership for all parties.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and it's getting that initial enablement for them to be able to see that why, right? And understand. And like you were talking about, one of the things that I think one of the content elements that every onboarding should include is use cases for the end clients. Because one of the biggest things that I see MSPs not be able to do is identify the right clients for the right product or service. And if you do a good job at explaining the use cases, it opens their view of what clients they can now go after that might be have benefit of the use case and the solution that they're trying to put together.
To take that a step further, so I've implemented use cases or target markets, if you will, in our partner onboarding journey. The other thing I've done is, hey, who are we not a fit for? The last thing I want a partner to do is implement our product and say, hey, this customer is not seeing a lot of feedback or a lot of value, and they're giving rough feedback on they're just not using it. I want to avoid that like the plague. So highlighting, hey, this is who we're really, really strong for, but then also, hey, this is where it's kind of a weaker market for us, or the use cases that are a little bit different. And that'll vary, vendor by vendor. But being able to show that level of transparency with, hey, inside of your customer base, here's who we're a very, very good fit for, and here's who we're not a great fit for.
Yep.
And I think we're
Identifying the
seeing,
negatives as well as the positives is a good idea because it saves them time.
yeah. And I think we're seeing kind of a shift in transparency where, at least early on in my experience with the people that I've talked to, it's like, hey, we're going to broadcast anywhere and everywhere. And there's a lot of things changing in the channel over the past years. Do want to talk to you about that. How have you seen the channel change over the past 10 years, whether it's in terms of growth, accessibility, mindsets, kind of approaches to the market? And then in the future, where do you think it's going to go?
So a lot has changed since I've been doing this, right? Uh, it goes to figure that doing this for more than 20 years, that'll happen. Um, I've seen this transition from break fix to recurring revenue to managed services, and we're still in this big spectrum of, we have both ends and everything in between still, which I think is good for some reasons, not so good for other reasons. We could stand to have some standardization and some compliance, especially around offering fully managed services. Because if you're
Mm-hmm.
taking on that responsibility, you should have a minimum level of compliance and process that you're delivering to call it managed services. But I think there's still opportunity for break fix out there because there are just businesses that are that small and there's a ton of them.
Absolutely.
Security, has changed immensely over the last 20 years. When I had my first ransomware attack that I had to mitigate, it was because somebody had left, port 3389 open on a server. We had just taken this client over, had not done their onboarding yet. So we had not discovered the open ports yet.
Oh man.
And, you know, that was back when it still had to be manually installed. The ransomware, that is. And now you have ransomware as a service. Anybody can go out to the dark web and say, hey, I just want to try and ransomware, a bunch of companies and make some money off of it. And so we formalized that criminal behavior over the last several years. And then one of the other bigger things that we saw with the pandemic, how managed service providers really became essential to small to medium sized businesses. No longer a nice to have, because people needed to work remotely, and you have to have security. And the average small business owner and even medium sized business owner doesn't have the time or the talent to do those things. And so we've just become much more essential. Now, moving into the future, I think what you see a separation of the commodity based help desk services type delivery,
Hmm.
and then more of the consulting side of things. Okay. So I think the bigger money is in the consulting side. There's obviously still opportunity in the help desk commodity based, but to me, that's a race to the bottom, because you're always just trying to gain more efficiency so you can handle more clients, more calls, more tickets with less and less help desk technicians and engineers. And so to me, that goes counter to what I would want to do, but there are people out there doing it and doing it well.
Yeah, I talked to a couple MSPs over the past couple months just about the shift in their different markets, especially post COVID, where MSPs became essential. I think they got it, a lot more recognition than they have in the past, which is great. This industry is usually underloved, if you'll call it that. But they have this constant battle where it is a race to the bottom, especially on those commodity type services. I was talking to an MSP the other day where they've got these break fix shops that have turned into MSPs that are at like $65 a user a month. And like, I just can't compete at that price point. And I'm like, well, you don't have to, because
Yeah.
the customers that are going to subscribe to those services, they may or may not know what they're getting, but that's where you go upstream to those more mature, small, medium businesses that truly value and see the need for not just an MSP, but kind of moving towards that, whether it's a technology success provider or a business success provider.
Yeah.
Because as an MSP, you're no longer just the IT, guy or gal, where you're truly going in as that trusted advisor, that trusted resource.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's really that trusted advisor. We've called it that. We've called it VCIO. We've called it a bunch of different things. But the bottom line is adding value to the small to medium sized customers is is at the end of the day what is going to make you more money. Now, I believe in an abundance mentality, which fits perfectly in with what you're talking about, because I think that there's more than enough business out there for every MSP, whether you do break
Hmm.
fix, whether you do fully managed services, whatever, because there are so many small to medium sized businesses out there. We don't have to fight over crumbs. There are clients that will meet us where we want to deliver our services. And so do it the way you want to do it, and find the clients that will do it your way.
That's such a great message to those that might see, like, man, I've got an MSP every 2.5 miles. What am I going to do to compete against those? The reality is you don't have to. There is a true abundance of small, medium businesses, or even mid-market, small, medium enterprise businesses that, hey, Microsoft Copilot just came out. I need some advising on what the heck does this mean? How do I implement this with my business?
Yep.
That's where you talked about the consulting mindset. Um, it's truly a level of maturity, or moving to those customers that see the value. So
Yep.
speaking of adding value, educating the folks, I do want to take a minute to highlight you with All Things MSP, because again, I think you're doing a tremendous job not only educating the MSP market, the SMB market, but also us as the vendors. Can you talk to me a little bit about, why you started All Things and then how it's grown over the years?
Yeah. So All Things MSP is about 6 years old. I started it when I stopped having more of a public facing role, back when I was at SolarWinds. And I created it because I wanted an outlet to engage the rest of the community, not for any other reason other than I thought that we could all contribute to the common problems, the common solutions that everybody was facing for the non-technical side of running an MSP. And that's kind of where it was born. It was born as the Facebook group. That's where it existed first. And that's obviously, still where we have the largest group of members. We have, I think we're closing in on somewhere around 5,200 in the Facebook group now,
That's incredible.
and I think we're a little over 1,500 on YouTube as well. So it's grown very well over the last several years. Uh, in the last, I would say, year and a half, 2 years, I've really started to develop a little bit more of a plan for it going forward, which is also why we started to engage sponsors this year, is because we have things that we want to do. Those things take money. And so that's one of the reasons we're doing that. But just so many things that I think the community can provide for itself. And I guess I'm wording it this way because I I don't see myself as the expert. I see myself as somebody who can bring people together who are experts, who can share, in this community. And that's what I'm about. Is I'm about bringing it all together. Now, I do have the things that I kind of like to talk about, specifically around partner experience, customer experience, and going back to, you mentioned vendors. I don't look at vendors as just an opportunity to sponsor this community. I think
Hmm.
vendors are very much a part of this community. And that's why I came up, if somebody doesn't know, we actually have a free level of vendor engagement called vendor partnership. And that allows you to engage with the community and be part of the community as a member and not just a vendor.
Yeah. And I want to highlight that last piece specifically. I would recommend any and all vendor, regardless of where you're at in your stage, whether you're, still in stealth mode or, you know, large corporation, take advantage of those communities, really indulge yourself and get yourself ingrained with those communities. That's where you're going to learn exactly what your partners actually want and where you become that real trusted advisor to those. So,
Yep.
Eric, with that said, if people want to reach out, learn more things about All Things MSP, or just get to know the great human being that you are, how do they do that best?
Just search for All Things MSP either on Facebook or on LinkedIn. Probably the two easiest places to find us. Or if you're just into watching videos, you can go look for the All Things MSP YouTube channel as well. Basically, just search for All Things MSP, maybe my name, you'll find it.
Perfect. Well, Eric, thank you very much for joining, and really appreciate this.
Yeah, thank you.